Welcome to Let the Boys Kiss, the creation of queer ships, where we ask the question, is it queer baiting, queer coding, or queer canon?
This week, we'll be discussing 80s buddy action movies. I'm Maddie.
And I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Todd.
Wait, what?
Who the hell is Todd? We announced this at the end of our last one, but if anybody didn't hear, we have a stranger among us, but only to you. He is a friend of mine. Kelsey met him not that long ago, but he's a listener of the pod, and he came to me with an idea for this episode, and I thought it was a delightful idea, and we didn't want to just steal it from him, so here he is, joining the combo. Happy to be here, Todd?
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I want to specify I consider you both friends. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. This is my first podcast experience, I guess I'll say. But I am going to watch what I say because I do plan on hosting Jeopardy at some point in my career.
So if you could say really offensive stuff during this, that would probably help you get hired.
Just hot takes, because I think the pendulum is going to swing back. And that it's going to be like, he's not offensive enough to host this game show. Yeah. So I'm just preparing for that.
I think that is our future. So 80s buddy action movies is what we are calling this episode. We're broadly considering any movie, two-hander ensemble with two guys who have, chemistry in some sort of macho action movie from the 80s era.
Yeah, it's going to be another one of our sort of grab back episodes that we've done before. And we're also throwing in a movie from 74 and 95 just to see if there's any shifts that happen.
It's important for people to have context. So yeah, we watched a long list of films for this one. I don't know that we need to run through them all right now, but we all watched all of them. So Todd, kick us off because this was all your baby, this episode.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, we're doing one from the 70s. It's just kind of like, where did it start? So I wanted to throw in one from there. And then we threw in one in the 90s that I think goes with the motif that we're talking about. And then also that one specifically goes into another topic that we're going to discuss, which is the aspect of race within these buddies. I chose this topic because I had looked at some of the other ships that had been discussed on this podcast, and I thought that they've been pretty recent. I think that this is a good way to go back a little bit, and I think it's just glaring and it needs to be discussed. And so while researching this topic, I read a chapter of a book, Buddy Films and Gender Identity, Representing the Bonds of Masculinity by Jody Mason. So basically, in the 60s and 70s, there was civil unrest.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Yes, with second wave feminism and the civil rights movement, white middle-class men felt disenfranchised. I'm not sure if that sounds familiar.
When don't they?
So in response to everything that was happening there in the 80s, post-Vietnam, you have the Reagan globalism and the glorification of capitalism that gives you Gordon Gekko, but it also gives you like the cartoonish idea of masculinity that is Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. So, and it's like kind of happening now where white middle-class men also feel disenfranchised. And that's why Kumail has to do all those sit-ups.
Oh my God, poor Kumail suffers for everyone.
It comes in waves, and we're kind of reliving this a little bit. And that's why you'll see Trump's face over Sylvester Stallone's body, because it goes full circle. So just some trends mentioned in this chapter. In the 70s, there was a focus on the mentor buddy movie, like Thunderfoot and Lightfoot, excuse me.
Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. I promise you we're going to say that every which way that is not correct through the course of this episode.
That's a movie, which we will discuss later. And then one of the big things is the idea of masculinity in the 60s and early 70s was in reaction to the masculinity of the Westerns in the 50s. And so then you had more slim-framed action stars. And then one of the other things that was interesting that they vocalized in this chapter was that they were on the same team and that it was them versus society. Like, let's just say Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, they bickered.
But lovingly.
But lovingly. And by the time you get to the 80s, like I said, the civil rights movement and the second wave feminism, there's like a reaction to that. In the 80s, you have man versus man. And so they're always, and when we go through the movies that we were watching, like, oh, you're different because of race or class or whatever, and therefore it is us against each other. And then by the end of the movie, they maybe get along. But it absolutely is a reflection of the time which I thought was super interesting. And then, so there was creating a divide, and then they were vocalizing homophobia in these movies of like, oh, like, we got to quit meeting like this. And so one of the quotes here from the book was, the films reinforced the incompatibility of the masculine ideal of the 1980s and homosocial intimacy through the use of paranoid references, which only highlights the homoerotic tension.
They do bring your attention to it a lot in all of these movies.
They are addressing the homoerotic elephant in the room. Anyway, so then I'll quickly wrap up here, but there's a lot of phallic symbolism, like the guns, the trucks, the planes, everything is just an extension of a penis. And then also something that I thought that was interesting, along with the Reaganism, is the emphasis on the nuclear family. Like in the 60s and 70s, going back to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, one of the best bromance movies of all time, they resented staying at home and the traditional family values or whatever. They wanted the chase, they wanted to keep going, and they even bring the woman with them because they're not going to stay home with her.
And then she leaves and they stay together.
They sure do. They make their choices known.
I think this is me signing up for the Butch Cassidy and Sundance whole episode just on that.
Hey, I would do it. I love it.
But then in these 80s movies, it's always they're trying to get back to my wife, or you killed my wife, or like, I just got to get back to my wife and kids, and that's all that matters. But then instead of being with their wife and kids,
they're only with their male friends constantly.
Yeah. So basically, to sum it up, there's just overt cartoonish masculinity that's being displayed here. It's a lot of shirtless dudes with cutoffs, and they're just sweaty, and they're like shaking because they have a penis, also known as a machine gun, in their hand, and it's making them shake their muscles.
In slow motion.
And it's like, my favorite part is that there's the hypermasculinity of it, and they're perpetuating traditional values of masculinity and family and patriotism and nationalism. But what I love about it is that it's so gay. Like, the fans of these movies are these homophobic traditionalists, and they're watching naked, sweaty men arm wrestle.
But it's great because it leaves a space for the little closeted gay boys of the 80s to go to these movies that are culturally acceptable for them to watch and ogle shirtless Arnold Schwarzenegger walking in slow motion and 10-second shots of just his biceps.
And I don't know if this is the time to bring this up, but I think, there's something particularly homoerotic about how large these men are. Like,
yes,
this is a thought that I have all the time about, like, I don't know that that's what women are really into. Something about how large these men are, I think of as being particularly attractive to men, or something that men are particularly invested in a way that's not necessarily for the straight women in the audience.
Yes. I mean, this will come up through all of the movies, but I got this strong sense in a lot of them of just like, who is this for? Because these movies could not be more targeted at a specific male heterosexual audience, right? Like in terms of marketing and who is expected to watch all of these things. But so much of it is just glorification of these, I guess, idealized male forms, but who is the one idealizing them, right? And just the lingering sensual shots of their bodies. So much of the movies is that. And you're just like, is this like in case somebody's wife walks in the room and then she gets to be entertained for a second when he's like,
but I don't think this is for her.
Let me put this to rest. I promise you, the makers of the majority of the movies that we're about to discuss did not for one second think about the wife walking in and watching it.
I know, I'm with you on that. My question is, where does it come from? Why is it like, what all my straight bro friends want to see?
I'll tell you right now, it's wish fulfillment. Obviously, there's a spectrum here of like, sometimes it is the glorification of it or whatever, but speaking as a straight man, I don't necessarily want Arnold or Sly Stallone.
It's just the men want to be him is the
yes.
Yeah, men want to be him and women want to be with him. Like, except
women don't want to be with him is our point.
You're telling me that that's actively unattractive, or that's not ideal in a hypothetical part? You're throwing a lot of shade.
Sure. No, but I mean, I think for a lot of people, it is on the more unattractive side of the scale. I don't think that they're like, that's the ideal male form, but I would settle for less. I think they're like, it's a lot. Like, who's that for?
Like, that's why I chose it, is because you're right. I think that it's too extreme. But it reminds me of, my redneck is about to show y'all. It's a joke from the 2003 stand-up special Blue Collar Comedy Tour. This was like a strangely woke joke for a 2003 blue collar comedy tour. But basically, Ron White is saying that like he's like homophobes, like what a pointless position to have. Like who cares? And then in the joke, he's talking to a friend of his, and he's basically telling his friend, he's like, "Hey, we're all gay. It just is like to what degree you're gay." And the guy's like, "Yeah, that's bullshit. I ain't gay at all." And he's like, "Yeah, you are. I can prove it." And then he goes, "Fine, prove it." And he goes, "Well, do you like porn?" And he goes, "Yeah, I love porn, you know." And he goes, "Well, do you just watch scenes with two women?" He's like, "No, I like watching a dude and a chick, you know, have sex." And he was like, "Well, do you like it when the guy has a flabby, half flaccid penis?" And he goes, "No, I love hard throbbing cock." And he's like, "Oh, interesting. Did you know that about yourself before you just said it out loud?" So it's like that idea of just like, I'm not gay at all, but I love to watch these sweaty dudes shaking muscles when they're with the machine guns. It's hilarious to me. That's why I chose it. Let's dig into the movies.
Wonderful. So let's take it back to the 70s.
Yes. First one, and I will say correctly this time, is Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. Is in 1974. While stealing a car, free-spirited drifter Lightfoot, played by Jeff Bridges, crosses paths with legendary thief Thunderbolt, played by Clint Eastwood, in the midst of his own escape. Thunderbolt's old partners in crime, Red and Eddie, believe he double-crossed them after they robbed a Montana bank vault several years ago. After Thunderbolt successfully pleads his innocence and is let off the hook, Lightfoot rallies them together as a group to rob the very same bank again. So this definitely feels very 70s. It was a very young Jeff Bridges, and Clint Eastwood was playing the old man.
Clint Eastwood has been playing the old man since 1974. Clint Eastwood is 1,000 years old.
So I had you guys watch this. What did you think generally? And I guess, what did you think of the obvious ship, which is Eastwood and Bridges, or Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, he said correctly one more time.
Very nice.
Nicely done, sir. Kelsey, you want to take it off?
Sure. I like this movie. You know, it's a heist. You can't go wrong with that. Jeff Bridges is great. He got nominated for an Oscar for this role, which is very interesting. But yeah, this was definitely an interesting watch and an interesting one to start off with. Lightfoot takes a liking to Thunderbolt right away. I was saying to Maggie before we record the podcast, over and over in my head since I watched it, I just can't get the scene out of my mind where like they're together and then Thunderbolt is going to leave and Lightfoot yells at him across the street, "I want your friendship." And I'm like, this is
it is a direct quote. No, I absolutely.
Maddie, your thoughts?
I liked it a lot less than you, I think. I did find it to be fascinating and speak to this conversation in a lot of interesting ways. And I will say I liked it more having read this fascinating review that you found, a contemporaneous review from 1974 about how the movie hates heterosexuality.
Yeah, it's a Peter Biskind review from a journal called Jump Cut, and the title of this article is "Sexual Politics in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, Tight Ass and Cocksucker."
Which, I mean, that title would have worked too. Fascinating, you know, meta.
Yeah.
Not that it would have been called that at the time, but it very much is that. Like, every heterosexual couple in this movie is humiliated by the film. And like any guy with an attraction to women is totally made fun of for that. And like reading it in light of that did make it really interesting to me. But at the time, like watching it, it's tough because, you know, it's so misogynistic. There's a lot of it that's painful to watch in a like 70s kind of way.
I saw that Catherine Bach was in this movie, and she is, of course, known as her role as Daisy Duke in The Dukes of Hazzard. And then I was like, oh, great, I guess it'll be like a three-hander, like The Dukes of Hazzard. But no, she was in it for one scene, and she was very much thrown away.
Who was she?
She's one of the women that they sleep with at the beginning.
Oh, she's one of the prostitutes.
Remember how you forgot about any women being in it at all? The scene that didn't need to exist where they got hookers?
I knew there were the two prostitutes. Because I think it is relevant as well that Thunderbolt has sex, but he doesn't seem to be enjoying it at all.
Having a good time. He gets bullied into it by Lightfoot, and then he's like, oh, I guess I have to sleep with this woman right now.
Did you enjoy Jeff Bridges' performance, Maddie?
Jeff Bridges is delightful. Here's what I'll say. Jeff Bridges, so charming. He's giving it his all. He is trying so hard to connect with Clint Eastwood, and I will say this, you cannot connect with Clint Eastwood. But yeah, I mean, Jeff Bridges is there just like flirting up a storm, and Clint Eastwood is just like, okay.
There's two things that happen in this movie that happen in a lot of these, which is one, direct reference to like, oh, people might think we're gay or whatever. It's like, oh, we got to stop meeting like this or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing is, for way longer than I had anticipated, Jeff Bridges is in full drag.
And he
Yes.
looks good, man.
He does.
He looks good. Great legs.
I liked his wig.
Good wig. And it's not just that he's in drag, but he and Clint Eastwood act as a couple from like a lot of the length of the scene where he's in drag. They're undercover as a straight couple post heist.
And let's not forget that, you know, there's a history of cross-dressing in comedy, like for comedic effect, right? Like your Milton Berles, right? People could get arrested for cross-dressing in public and then go turn on one of the 3 channels that is on their TV and watch Milton Berle in a dress. And This is in 1974. We're not that far removed from that, right?
It is a fascinating era from which this film emerges.
I think there's something else interesting too happening. So there are these 2 other characters that they hook up with later in the movie, Red and Eddie, as you mentioned, Todd, in the intro. And the Red character keeps being like, but he's my friend. I'm friends with him.
Oh,
he has this experience in the war.
It randomly turned halfway through into a
four-hander.
Yeah, and I think like there's definitely a reading of this movie where Red and Thunderbolt had an intimate relationship, and now like that's the level of jealousy he's experiencing for Lightfoot.
And that also is a great point, because that is a motif that happens all the time. And this is not one of the movies that we're going to discuss today, but like even Rambo, right? Mm-hmm. The whole point of it was that he was going back to like connect with his war buddies, and not to dismiss every war friendship as homoerotic. And by the way, we'll get to it in Commando.
Well, Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. So that's the 70s. That's where we're starting. That's what we are going to contrast potentially the 80s films with.
All right. AO3, you guys want to go into that?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about AO3 with each of these examples. Not a ton of fic throughout this whole episode, just saying that up front.
I don't think people will be surprised.
No, this one has 3 total fics. They are all / one of them is in Japanese.
Hell yeah. But yeah, we'll come back to the AO3 stuff at the end, but we're just giving you the stats as we go.
Yeah.
Okay, next movie. Now we're in the 80s. It is 48 hours, and so annoyingly, it is not spelled out 48 hours, so when you Google this movie, you have to put 48 space HRS, and that is my biggest critique of the movie.
Wow. That is your biggest critique of the movie.
Otherwise, perfection.
Otherwise, no notes, 10 out of 10, which if you haven't seen this movie, you'll laugh about that later. Here's the quick log line. It's renegade cop Jack Cates, played by Nick Nolte, pulls bank robber Reggie Hammond, played by Eddie Murphy, in his first feature debut, from a federal prison on a 48-hour leave to help him capture Hammond's old partner. Having escaped from prison work crew, his old partner is on a killing spree around San Francisco on the trail of $500,000 that went missing after one of his robberies. The cocky Reggie, Eddie, knows where the money is, but spars with the hot-headed Jack, Nolte, as he enjoys his temporary freedom. So I'll very quickly say I enjoyed this movie a lot, and I don't think that you guys did. And I think that is something that we can discuss. So why don't I throw it to you?
So 48 Hours, I should say, a lot of people consider this sort of the OG buddy cop movie. So we knew that going into watching it, and we had expectations that it would follow the sort of the formula of a buddy cop movie that you anticipate. You know, these guys meet each other, they butt heads, they have opposite personalities, then they have to work together, and over the course of the movie they learn to appreciate each other, they become friends, they solve whatever the case is, and everyone's happy in the end. None of that happens in this movie. If that's what you're expecting, you expected wrong. My main reaction to it is it was unpleasant is the word I would use. I had a hard time having fun, which I feel like is what I want from this genre of film. Nick Nolte is the most Nick Nolte ever. He like just mumbles his way through the whole movie. Eddie Murphy, charming as all hell. This is Eddie Murphy's first film role. People knew him from SNL, but this movie, it's like, whatever else you say about it, it's evident that he's a star watching this movie. So,
oh, yes.
There's a scene in it in particular that is my favorite part of the movie that he steals and is great. But other than that, my issue is they're not buddies. They don't start buddies. They don't become buddies. They're never going to be buddies. Nick Nolte's super racist. He's the white guy cop. Eddie Murphy, you might know, is black. So Eddie Murphy is this criminal. He gets him out of prison to help him out. He spends the first, 3/4 of the movie, literally calling him the N-word and saying a bunch of racist stuff to him. There's like this weird power dynamic because they're not buddy cops. One of them is a criminal who can be sent back to prison at any time by this guy who's just constantly calling him abusive racist names. And then add into the mix, they're both super misogynistic and homophobic. And so there's just like a lot of unpleasantry throughout the course of the thing. And then you're like, how are they going to become buddies after all this? But Kelsey, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I felt similarly. It's interesting talking about this movie afterwards because, like, I almost have more of a problem with the way women are portrayed in this movie than in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, where it's misogynistic and they're dismissed and they're mistreated, but the women are written in this movie in a way that doesn't make any sense. So Nick Nolte has a girlfriend who's inexplicable. There's a woman that Eddie Murphy sleeps with who is inexplicable.
Oh my God, that is insane.
No woman would act like, what are we doing? I also think, right, structurally, like we had this experience watching the movie, like there are multiple points in the film where you would expect their relationship to turn.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen when you would expect. And then seemingly randomly later in the movie, they're like, now we're friends. And you're like,
you're not.
No.
Like if you were people, you're not. No.
Okay, here's what I'm going to say. The joke earlier about how my biggest note about the movie, it being the title, was a joke. It's 1982. Like it wouldn't be excusable, but it would be more understandable if we were talking about the movie from 1974 at this point, right? Like throwing a hard in, it is not okay. It is not okay. It's the biggest flaw of the movie. It is absolutely like I'm not going to defend that at all. What I will say about what you're saying about how they're not becoming friends, I think this, and this is coming from the male perspective, obviously, but also someone that has an older brother, there is something about that, one could argue, toxic masculine dynamic.
I think you could definitely argue that, yeah.
One kind of half is right now. But there's that thing that happens. I will just give a brief personal example. Like, I remember my brother and I was probably 19 or 20, and my brother's 6 years older than me, and we had never fought physically as adults. It was always, roughhousing his kids or whatever. But there's just one time, and I think he was back home from college or something, and he was just in a real bad mood or whatever. And then we were just at each other's throats, and then we just fist fought for 10 minutes, and one of my friends was there, and he was just like, what the hell's happening? And then he was like, guys, like, are we joking or we're not joking? It was just like, we broke the couch. He broke the couch.
Jesus Christ. Was blood spilled?
Well, he took his glasses off.
Thankfully.
But I think he hit me as a half joke, and then it was harder than, and then it was like, well, screw you. So then I hit him across the face. I'm working the body. He's got me in a headlock. It went on for 10 minutes, right?
Wow.
And then afterwards, he just goes, okay, and he helped, pulled me up, and then we literally just both opened a beer, and then we it was good. It was just whatever tension there was or whatever. It was like we fought it out, and I tell that very personal story very quickly to say that there was something about, and maybe there might be different undertones, especially racially and maybe sexually in terms of this dynamic that we're talking about in this movie. But there is something to be said about sometimes it is cathartic and, meaningful to have it out with them and then be vulnerable in that way physically with them. And then afterwards you're closer. So there's not that big heart to heart. It's fist to fist. And sometimes that means something.
You're partially making my point for me, Todd, because there is a scene in this movie where they physically fight, and it is one of the moments when Kelsey and I both were like, maybe this is what will make them friends now. Like, we buy that, right? I'm not saying that two men in a movie can't be at each other's throats and then find some sort of catharsis through fighting. We've seen that a lot. I get that formula. That's not what's happening here. The first scene, when you expect them to become friends, is the one that we mentioned as being the best scene of the movie. They make this bet that he can get information out of people in this Confederate bar full of racist rednecks. And again, I'll remind you, he's black, so that plays into it. So he goes into the bar, he takes Nick Nolte's badge, pretends to be a cop, and he steals the scene. He goes around, he has all this great banter with everyone in the room. Nobody can take their eyes off of him. He's humiliating this room of rednecks, and you're watching it like, yeah, Eddie Murphy, do it, Eddie Murphy. And you think Nick Nolte is also watching him like, oh, I'm gaining a newfound respect for this Eddie Murphy character who I didn't know anything about. But no, he's not gaining a newfound respect for him.
It's a flaw.
And then they do have that fight scene, and we're
Right.
like, okay, so this is the moment that it's going to turn. They're going to now be like, well, we fought it out and we're friends. But that doesn't seem when their relationship turns either. As best we could tell, it's when Nick Nolte loses track of Eddie Murphy, and then Eddie Murphy calls him from the bar, and we're like, this is the moment of all these things?
He calls him from the bar, and then because of this, I guess he's decided he can trust him, and they have a scene where Nick Nolte's like, sorry I said all the N-word to you. I was just keeping you in your place. And Eddie Murphy's reaction is like, it's all good, but bro, we're friends now.
I'm not excusing the racism, but the antagonistic aspect of the dynamic is what I will defend.
I just think it's the simple shift of them having that conversation directly after the fight. Like, that makes the movie substantially better.
Right.
I fully agree. I agree with that.
AO3, there's nothing there. There's nothing on AO3 for 48 hours. On to the next.
Okay. So Rocky 3, one of the greatest 80s bromances, which is Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed. So the logline is, having become the world heavyweight champion, former working-class boxer Rocky Balboa is rich and famous beyond his wildest dreams, which has made him lazy and overconfident. In a double whammy, he loses his trainer and father figure, Mickey, and then has his title stolen by the arrogant, menacing challenger, Clubber, played by Mr. T. Turning to his former adversary, Apollo Creed, played by Carl Weathers, for help, Rocky struggles to get his old fire back. Now, I'll ask you this question, which is, overall, have you seen and or are you a fan of the Rocky series? And then additionally, very quickly, what did you think about this one in particular?
I think it's my turn to go first. I have seen Rocky 1. I like Rocky 1 a lot. I'm curious what happened in Rocky 2 to get us to Rocky 3, because he is a different character in this movie.
Yep.
But it's fine. It's like, it's a sports movie. It's kind of what you think it's going to be. It feels like it does have a little bit of stunt casting, right? Like Mr. T is in it. Hulk Hogan is in it.
Introducing Mr. T. So this was a big role for him, is what it said in the credits.
Is this like before the A-Team?
This movie came out in 1982. The A-Team came out in 1983.
So it really was introducing Mr. T, man.
My goodness. Well, that's very exciting.
It is. Yeah, I'll echo what you said. I mean, I thought it was a fine time. If you know that you're watching a boxing movie, you get exactly what you expect. But it was kind of weird that the two of us had just watched and discussed at length Rocky 1 before we watched this, because you wouldn't know they were the same series other than the fact that the character has the same name.
They have to escalate it, but it eventually becomes a caricature of itself. And then Rocky 4 is very much in Rocky 3, where it's just like ridiculous and fantastic. Rocky 5 is absolutely unwatchable. Then you get back down to the more grounded, is the word I'm looking for, in Rocky Balboa. And then with the Creed of it all, you get into the perfect combination. And then also you're continuing this bromance through, spoiler alert, Apollo Creed's son, played by Michael B. Jordan. But anyway, so we'll get into it very quickly. So in the first one, Rocky Balboa fights Apollo Creed. He doesn't win, but he goes the distance. And then in the second one, they fight again. It's a rematch. And then he beats Apollo Creed. And then in the third one, which is one we're discussing now, he's the champion, and now he has to like figure out what his career is now that he's on top. And then he has to go back to the person, former adversary, as the logline said. And then, like I said, sometimes it's cathartic to beat the shit out of your best friend. The reason I chose this movie to go in there is because how strong the bromance is, and it peaks here. Especially, the visuals are just still flowing through my head right now of the beach scene with the crop tops, the short shorts, the hugging, the wife watching.
The frolicking.
The frolicking in the surf.
Perfect word. Perfect word.
Good time.
It's great. I mean, a third of this movie is one long training montage, and I love a training montage. I mean, the frolicking on the surf is great. Some of my favorite gay moments of the montage, though, are when he's teaching him footwork, and they're doing this side-by-side dance sort of thing, and Creed is right up behind Rocky, and they're just, like, kind of dancing together several times. That was one of my favorite parts. But yeah, I mean, it's homoerotic as all get out, you know?
Now, what do you guys think about the race aspect of it? Because Paulie is racist.
Yes. They go to a boxing gym where Apollo Creed originally trained, and it's like everyone who trains there is black, and Paulie coming from is Philadelphia like real white? I don't know.
I don't know much about Philadelphia, but if it's anything like Chicago, sometimes it can be very segregated. So I would argue that he's probably from a very white and or very Italian side of Philly, and that he probably doesn't come in contact too much with the black side of town.
Yeah, I mean, the racial element of this is mostly glossed over. I would say in terms of the Rocky Apollo relationship, like, does it even come up?
It doesn't come up, but I think that there's an interesting aspect, and Kelsey, off camera, you had kind of brought up this dynamic before, which is a white man turning to a black man to save him. If you take a step back, the optics of it, just like, now that I've defeated you, I need your help to help me defeat this other black man, Mr. T.
Well, that's a part of it to me that stood out. To finish that thought, I would say yes, but also it's Creed who comes to him and decides to train him up. Rocky is not even in the mood to do this fight, so that complicates it a little bit. But I think if we're looking at optics, there's a montage where he's fighting a bunch of different people, and the first several people that he's fighting are black, and I started to be like, is this is this going to change at some point? That was a part where optically I found it noticeable.
Is that a reflection of the state of boxing at the time, though, potentially?
No, I think it 100% is a reflection of the time. I just found it to be an interesting visual for the montage.
Yeah.
Moving on, AO3, there are a few more for this, but it's over the course of the series. There are 46 Rocky on AO3. 5 of them are Rocky / Apollo. But you have also listed here, Kelsey, some more slash.
Yeah, so of equal popularity, I guess, or greater popularity, there are 6 Adonis Victor slash ships, which I think is from Creed, which, you know, fits with their recency bias. And there are an equal number of Rocky Ivan slash Fix as Rocky Apollo.
Fascinating. Moving along to 1984 with Beverly Hills Cop. Give us the rundown, Todd.
Absolutely. From 1984, Beverly Hills Cop, after his childhood buddy is murdered while visiting Detroit, rebellious cop Axel Foley, played by Eddie Murphy, follows the leads to Beverly Hills, California, under the auspices of a vacation. He checks in with his old friend Ginny Summers and starts to believe her boss might somehow be involved in the murder. However, a lieutenant of the Beverly Hills Cop Police Department does not trust Foley and hinders his search for evidence. So there's a big theory that the character of Axel Foley, played by Eddie Murphy, is gay, and that his childhood buddy, that is the inciting incident at the beginning of this movie, was his lover. And then there's pieces of evidence throughout the movie to support that theory, which is that there's no love interest for him, which is odd in this era and this genre.
It's not just that there's no love interest, it's that there's a female main character who is not a love interest. He has a female platonic friend.
Although I think you could potentially think that there's something else happening in that dynamic as well, which he goes to Beverly Hills and he's only around white people, and we can't show a black man in a relationship with a
That's
white
certainly
woman
possible too
in a movie in the 80s.
But also to that point, they totally could have made her black, right?
Sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's different ways to look at it. But also one of the other things I'll just very quickly point out is that one of the people that he does connect with is the gay. He works at the art museum, or the art gallery, as well. Art gallery. He's broing out with the gay guy. That he's avenging his buddy's death.
Well, it's not just his buddy. His buddy tells him he loves him in so many words before he gets murdered at the beginning of the movie. So it's like less subtext than I expected it to be going into it. I buy the theory is my reaction to this movie. Yeah. I think it tracks that he's avenging his friend who has confessed his love for him, and he's all sad about it, and that's why he doesn't want to sleep with his lady friend through the course of the movie.
Him being gay, it doesn't affect the plot. It doesn't affect anything. It's just like probably the case in terms of the producers of this movie thinking about that. But it's just like, probably.
And I think we would be remiss if we didn't say, given our earlier conversation, one of the better female characters we're going to get in this run of movies, his friend.
And that's what I'm saying. If a female character in one of these movies is not a love interest, she's 1,000 times more likely to seem like an actual human character.
Well, if they have emotions and thoughts and, motivation and opinions, then the audience won't want to sleep with her. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. It all makes sense. On AO3, 2 total fix for Beverly Hills Cop. I assume the entirety of the series. And
yes,
one of them, Kelsey.
One is about Judge Reinhold's character, and one is about Zach, who is Victor Maitland's right-hand man. And it was like, why is this a thing? Why is this happening? But it turns out he's played by Jonathan Banks, and the person who wrote the fic just loves Jonathan Banks. So that explains that.
So yeah, not a ton going on there. Again, not a surprise. Taking it into 1985, we've got Commando and the first of our Schwarzenegger movies. And if anyone is the star of this genre of film, it is Schwarzenegger. So tell us about that.
So it's a retired Special Forces soldier, John Matrix, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, lives with daughter Ginny in isolation, but his privacy is disturbed by former Commander Franklin Kirby, who warns him that his fellow soldiers are getting killed one by one. After Kirby leaves, Ginny is kidnapped by former Latin American dictator Arias, who wants Matrix to restore him to power. Instead, Matrix sets out to take down the rogue leader and rescue his daughter. This is just textbook what you think of when you think of like 80s cheesy action movies. Chef's kiss, this is it. And also, it is so goddamn gay. So I guess the ship we can discuss is between Arnold and then Bennett, played by Vernon Wells, who is one of the villains, who said his costume was based off of Freddie Mercury. And I don't need to break news here, but he was a gay man and arguably flamboyantly dressed one.
Very
so,
least a queer man. I don't know that we have a full answer on his exact sexuality.
That's fair. Yes, I thank you for the specification. A queer man. So anyway, he's wearing like mesh shirts and stuff in this movie. And just like the movie starts with just like it's all cheesy. It's fucking great. And we can discuss the merit that you guys will grant this. But to go to like the homoeroticism or whatever, we see him first and he's either shirtless or in a tank top, I can't remember. But then he carries this giant log and it's just like looping in Sigmund Freud. What does that log mean, Arnold?
Because it's long, and I mean like long stretches of camera just on his bicep.
I'm obsessed with the editor of this film.
Yes, 100%. Great note. But here's what I'll say, is that what I love about this movie is that it doesn't try to be nuanced. It doesn't try to say anything besides, maybe we can get into that. But it's, you know what it is? It's cotton candy. It's sweet and it has zero nutritional value and it's gone like that. It is fantastic. It's straight to the point. It is oddly, like you talked about, probably not a great female character, but it's a hell of a lot better than some of the ones we have discussed and will discuss. And with the race issue there as well, it is cotton candy and it is ridiculous. And it doesn't take itself seriously, but it also doesn't make fun of itself. It's just straightforward cotton candy. Ladies,
it is exactly what it is. Kelsey, you take it off.
Again, the editor should get a Lifetime Achievement Award. Some of the quick cuts in this are extraordinary. Really interesting to watch because you're going through, and it is a buddy movie, but his buddy is this woman that he's with the whole time. And so you're watching, you're like, so is she going to be a love interest for him? Because I think 99% of the time, that would be the case. But as you're watching it, you're like, no, the villain, Bennett, is obsessed and in love and felt rejected by him. And
he got kicked out of their unit. Arnold kicked Bennett out of their unit and Bennett didn't take it well.
No. And again, watching it and being like, so why aren't they trying to do something with Arnold and the person helping him is again, like we have a white man and a black woman and we're not showing that in a movie for 1985. Mm-hmm. But then very strangely at the end of the movie, there's a little indication that maybe they're going to end up together. And it's like
at the end, they rescue the daughter and the daughter comes and hugs this woman she's literally never seen before. And it's like, they're a family. How did that happen when there was no romantic tension?
Very strange.
I have something for you guys, which is direct quotes from this movie. To set up the scene, Bennett, the villain, has the daughter at gunpoint, and then Arnold has a knife. He does not have a gun. But here is the line. Arnold says, "Come on, let the girl go. Just between you and me, don't you deprive yourself of some pleasure. Come on, Bennett, let's party." To which Bennett replies, "I can beat you. I don't need the girl." Then, cut to very quickly after, they tussle and whatever. Then, he has a gun on Schwarzenegger, and he says, "John, I'm not going to shoot you between the eyes. I'm going to shoot you between the balls." Then, Arnold takes some pipe and throws it through his body, and then steam goes through his torso, and Arnold says, "Why don't you let off some steam?" Woof. I need a cold shower after just that line reading.
Yeah. Death by penetration. Yeah, it's gay. It's like exactly what you expect. It's the entire conversation we're having at the beginning of this, where it's like, who's this for, gentlemen?
Well, and if you thought that Clint Eastwood was a brick wall, Arnold Schwarzenegger is a concrete slab to work with. So I don't know how much method acting he was doing, but at least the actor that played Bennett was absolutely playing it gay.
100%. I buy it. On AO3, there's only one fic, and it is Cindy / Matrix, who's Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, Schwarzenegger and his lady friend.
Actual speed rounds now, people.
Running Scared, 1986, starring Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal. It's Ray and Danny, played by Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal, are two Chicago police detectives hot on the trail of a drug kingpin. They manage to nab the drug lord, but the bus is messy and the two are suspended. While vacationing in Key West, Florida, they decide to retire from the police force and open up a bar together. But when they return to Chicago and find out that Gonzalez has been released on bail, they vow not to quit the force until the dangerous dealer is behind bars for good. This is probably one of the less known movies that we're discussing today, and it was kind of funny. I liked it. I hadn't seen it before, but it was on my list of buddy cop movies to watch. And I think that some things didn't age well. I will say that police misconduct is rampant. And that's also kind of a bit of an irony in the traditionalism of the 1980s action movies, which is just like, lawmen are good. And like almost every one of our lawmen here break all the rules.
Well, but that's how we've gotten where we are. We've created this whole genre of lawman who is good because he has the right morals, but doesn't actually follow any of the law. And that's not uncommon. But yeah, I mean, it's Billy Crystal and it's Gregory Hines. Like, they're a fun time. And they're kind of the buddiest of all the buddies in this list of movies, I think. They're straight up best friends, spend all their time together. They remind me a lot of Starsky and Hutch because they hit on women together for no reason. They'll find a woman and both hit on her at the same time. And you're like, what's going on here? Looking for threesomes.
They go to South Beach together. They're rollerblading around.
That's the gayest part, is when they're rollerblading in South Beach together. There's a 20-minute inexplicable scene.
It's not inexplicable. It's the whole point of the movie.
We actually were very disappointed they did not retire to South Beach at the end. That is the greatest flaw of this film.
Well, the greatest flaw in the film is that there's not the South Beach Running Scared 2.
Right.
100%. Why are they not retired in Florida? Is it South Beach? I thought they were in Key West or something. Yeah.
Oh,
Key
sorry,
West.
you're right. It's Key West.
But yeah, they were going to retire and start a bar and roller skate together for the rest of their days, and they should have done it because choosing to instead be a cop in Chicago sounds like a real fucking bummer.
Gregory Hines died in 2003. Otherwise, I would love to see a 2022, I guess, Billy Crystal, Gregory Hines, like old gay couple that used to be cops together in Chicago, owning a bar in Key West.
On board. Come on.
That would be great.
Billy Crystal would crush that.
They also are very comfortable just being in each other's lives. Like, there's a scene towards the end of the movie where Billy Crystal needs to save his ex-wife, and he just walks into Gregory Hines' apartment as he's having sex with a woman, and Gregory Hines is like, okay, let's deal with your problem.
Yeah. There's not even a moment of him being like, hey, why are you walking in here? He's just like, oh, Billy's here and he needs my help. Okay.
It's not that there are no boundaries, or I guess it is that there are no boundaries, right? It's like, just walk in, absolutely, I'm not going to be offended at all. They also drive on the L for 15 minutes on a car.
It's awesome. I've never seen a chase scene on L tracks. It was cool.
I think you're right. It's lesser known, but people should watch it. It's fun.
Totally. I think that's what I like about it. Had it been really popular, I would have nitpicked it more, but I'm like, this is fun. I hadn't heard of it. We didn't even talk about the race aspect of it either. And like I said, Chicago is very segregated. So that is an interesting aspect that they don't lean into, where they aren't at ends with each other. It is the day of old of the buddy movies where they are just from beginning to end on each other's side and they're buddies.
Yeah. Nothing on AO3 for this one, unsurprisingly, because I assume none of you have heard of it.
Someone should write an epic fic of them retiring to Key West.
Yes, fix the ending, guys.
Well, and I guess the question is, could there be a sequel? Yes, if like Gregory Hines' son is played by somebody, and then now he has to do that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now he has to open a bar in Key West.
It will also be Michael B. Jordan is going to be the son of Gregory Hines.
I would love a movie where he has to open a bar with Billy Crystal.
Well, no, he doesn't have to open a bar.
No, I want that to be the plot of it. Gregory Hines' like condition of Michael B. Jordan's inheritance is that he open a bar with Billy Crystal in Key West.
And then Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines' son, played by Michael B. Jordan, also hit on women collectively.
Together.
Absolutely. And they roller skate around in half shirts.
Yeah, yes. And short shorts.
And roller skating is back right now. They're on TikTok together.
What a dream.
Yes. And we're moving on from one of our least known movies to perhaps our most known movie.
And spoiler alert, my favorite movie of this batch. All right. Following the death of his wife, Los Angeles police detective Martin Riggs, played by Mel Gibson, becomes reckless and suicidal. When he is reassigned and partnered with Roger Murtaugh, played by Danny Glover, Riggs immediately clashes with the older officer. As they encounter increasingly dangerous situations, Riggs and Murtaugh begin to form a bond. Riggs' volatile behavior might just help them apprehend the criminals, if it doesn't kill them both first. This is probably the textbook of buddy cop. Don't get along by the end of it, antagonistic. There's the race, there's the family values, there's the class.
It has all the elements.
It has all the elements, and also fantastic performances by both of them. I mean, just across the board. And I will die on this hill that Mel Gibson should have gotten nominated for an Oscar for this movie.
I wouldn't have been mad about it.
He got cast in Hamlet because of the scene where he puts the gun in his mouth in the trailer, because that
appropriate,
is scene.
Powerful.
That is, not that it would happen now, but that is Oscar Lifetime Achievement Award montage material. Is some of the scenes where he's really losing it. So, had you guys seen this movie before, and whether you had or not, what do you guys think about it overall?
I had seen it, but a long time ago, long enough ago that I didn't remember more than a beat or two of it. So it was as if I had never seen it. I'm a big fan. I like it a lot. If I was sorely disappointed by 48 Hours buddy copness, Lethal Weapon delivered on everything I wanted from a buddy cop movie.
I think the thing is, too, which is unfortunate, is we watched a bunch of these movies together, Maddie and I did, and we watched this one first.
I know, right? Talk about setting ourselves up for failure.
Mel Gibson is fantastic, which is difficult at this point in history where you're like...
Just because he's a bad person doesn't mean that he's not a good actor. Yeah.
But I think in particular for this conversation, I'm obsessed with the ending of this film.
Oh, it's incredible.
You know what I mean? Are you talking about the...
Yeah. So let's describe it. So the bad guys have kidnapped Danny Glover's daughter. They're trying to get her back. It's this long series of action scenes. But they basically end up back at Danny Glover's house confronting the villain. And they basically allow Mel Gibson, who we've established earlier in the film's body is a lethal weapon because he does karate or something, to hand fight the bad guy. Like, they have guns. They could shoot him. The hydrant is broken, so it's spraying water over them.
There's a helicopter going.
Yeah, there's the lighting from the helicopter.
Mel Gibson is not wearing a shirt, but he's wearing jeans and no shooting socks. True.
Danny Glover's like, everyone stay back. Let him do this. He needs to do this.
There's sirens going, like the red, white, and blue is flashing everywhere. There's dozens of cops, and it's just like, let him do hand-to-hand combat. This is the real justice system.
It gets to a point in the fight where it looks like maybe Mel Gibson's not going to be able to win, and so then Danny starts to be like, should I call it? You need help? And it's like, no, I got this.
My masculinity will prevail.
Yeah. And so Mel Gibson seemingly wins the fight, and he comes over to Danny Glover, and Danny Glover wraps him in his coat. They're clutching him to his body. Oh. And then Gary Busey gets up, and he has his gun, and he's going to shoot him. And they unfurl together. So, like, Danny Glover still has his arm around Mel Gibson, but they're both holding their arms out, and they both shoot Gary Busey simultaneously.
Can I tell you? Absolutely.
It's glorious.
The way that you just described that was perfect. It was a fantastic performance on your part, Kelsey. But this, to me, it's like you were talking about running scared, how it was fun to watch them.
Yeah.
But this, to me, it was also fun, but also the most believable, where you did really track it 100%, where it's like, Murtaugh, I'm too old for this shit. I have my nuclear family that I'm worried about. And Riggs is like, I lost my wife, and therefore I am okay dying. But because of the codes of my morals and whatever, I'm going to fight bad guys. And
I can't actually kill myself. I have to just get killed in the line of duty.
Right, but you track it all the way through, and there's very tender moments, and there's very heartwarming moments, there's funny moments, there's action moments, it's just everything you want in a goddamn movie. Yeah. And then the movie starts with a naked woman jumping off of the top of an 80-foot...
We had a discussion about this when we watched it.
Let's hear. Oh my gosh.
It starts with the woman's breasts, and you're like, wow, a woman's breast, which honestly, this is not the only one of these movies that starts with a woman's breast. But then you immediately see Danny Glover's nipples, too, in the bath scene. And then when you meet Mel Gibson, you see his nipples, too.
everyone is nude at the beginning of this film. It's a fascinating choice.
Yes.
Hey guys, go ahead and tweet us what you guys think about this and use the hashtag #FreeTheNipple.
I'm telling you, they immediately turned it around because we're meeting everyone at their most vulnerable.
I literally said to Maddie when we got to Mel Gibson, like, we've seen 6 nipples already in this movie. That's great.
Well, I don't know if you guys do this too, but every time I watch a movie, I have my notes app out and I clock how many nipples we've seen. Right. No, but, and then, I mean, we could just talk for an hour and a half alone about why the hell they choose to what family walks in and is like, hello, bathing father. We're all in here together. Oh my God,
it's so weird.
That's a weird part. And there's also a weird part of Mel Gibson and Danny Glover's daughter.
Well, but they do it in the best possible way. They walk up to a line where you're like, how creepy is this going to get? But it's a way to have a girl fawning over Mel Gibson that is believable and not dumb. And then immediately her whole family makes fun of her for it in front of Mel Gibson. And it just like totally sells the joke. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the race aspect of it, which is interesting because you have the seemingly affluent black family, and then you have the living in a trailer, widower played by a white man. Race is not really mentioned. And so what do we think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because, at this point we've seen a number of the films with a two-hander where it's a white guy and a black guy. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it's just like normative. By the time we get to the late 80s, they're like, we have a white guy, we have a black guy, we're hitting both of our audiences. They'll bring in, the white audience, the black audience. It's present because we have a black character and white character, but it's not central to the story they're telling, and it's certainly not commented on.
And I think that's a strength. Even if there was a comment where it's like, are you saying that because I'm black? You know what I mean? Like, then they would just kick you out of it. But it's just not even, they have bigger fish to fry than any racial tension, which there is not.
Yeah, I would say Mel Gibson's suicidal ideation is like the main fish to fry.
Yeah, but that's what I love. To me, it's so dark and it's so character driven. That's why it's such a good movie.
It's really grounded. It's really well acted. Everyone's believable, and that's why the tender moments.
It's a good movie.
It's good. It's really good.
Yeah.
And I think that it honestly would be one of the most tender ships, right? If they were.
Exactly.
I mean, that moment at the end when they're together and they shoot Gary Busey. It's beautiful.
Well, I keep mentioning Starsky and Hutch because it's at the front of my mind at all times. Like, he gets clutched by Danny Glover, and I was like, this is how Starsky and Hutch would treat each other if they had been through this situation.
All right. Any AO3?
AO3 for this one. There are 16 total stories in AO3, but none of them are slash. What the hell? You're right that this fic would be tender and wonderful and full of hurt comfort moments, but nobody's doing it.
This is our call. Please write it.
On to the next. Still in 1987, the glory days of buddy action movies. We have Predator revisiting our boy Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And our boy Carl Weathers. All right, here's the logline very quickly. Dutch, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, a soldier of fortune, is hired by the U.S. government to secretly rescue a group of politicians trapped in Guatemala. But when Dutch and his team, which includes weapons expert Blaine, Jesse Ventura, and CIA agent George, Carl Weathers, land in Central America, something is gravely wrong. After finding a string of dead bodies, the crew discovers they are being hunted by a brutal creature with superhuman strength and the ability to disappear into its surroundings. So this is also 1987. It's also Schwarzenegger. It's also Carl Weathers. It's also shirtless men in a jungle with big guns. There's a lot of just homoeroticism throughout. Also genre-wise, it's one of the best examples, I think, of a war movie, an action movie, a horror movie.
And it's sci-fi.
And sci-fi. Yeah, so it's like 4 genres mixed into one. I think, strangely, it's one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's best performances. There's kind of just overall, like I said, a lot of broing out between these fellas.
War buddy thing for it, so.
The war buddy thing, and then also it's a meme now, but it's Arnold Schwarzenegger called where there's like muscles, like arm wrestling, like you've been posting too many pencils. I did the accent for you guys, okay?
Yeah, if you've seen that meme of just the 2 arms clutching hands, that's from this, in case you didn't know.
But what's funny is that that's not the ship. That could be a potential ship, but the main ship is between the character of Mac, which is played by Bill Duke, and Blaine, which is played by Jesse Ventura.
So yeah, Mac and Blaine, their whole deal is obviously they're everyone's war buddies. And this is a spoiler, but throughout the film, basically everybody dies. Predator's picking people off one by one. So Blaine is one of the earlier people to get killed by Predator. Mac freaks out He doesn't handle it well. He is distraught. He's shooting randomly into the jungle to try to kill the predator. And then there's this moment where he's talking to Arnold Schwarzenegger about it, and he says, he was my friend.
Oh, I'm a little upset that you got to say the line because I was waiting to say it.
Feel
There was
free.
a giant, you could drive a giant Arnold Schwarzenegger tank
pause.
through the pause between he was my friend.
Mhm.
And let's not forget also that the character played by Jesse Ventura at one point describes himself as a sexual Tyrannosaurus.
It's great.
What a choice of words that is.
Well, and at the time, he's encouraging all of his male buddies in the helicopter with him to take the chew that makes them into sexual tyrannosaurs. So there's subtext. Yeah, it's real gay. And it's nice. It's one of those tragic, he lost his quote-unquote friend, and he's real sad about it. And that's why war buddy things are always so homoerotic.
Here's my question for you guys. What movie do you like better, Commando or Predator?
Predator.
Yeah, I think Predator is a much better movie. It doesn't have the editor from Commando. Huge flaw.
Every movie should have been.
But I think Arnold is better in this movie also.
Here's what I'll say. And I think that I like Commando more because I'm not a big sci-fi guy. I'm not a big horror guy. And this obviously leans on that a lot. Like, we haven't even discussed Predator in this because I really wanted it just to be an action movie.
I will tell you who did appreciate the presence of Predator, and it is the fic writers in this fandom.
It 100% is. Yeah, that's a great transition. There's 48 total fics over the Predator original series franchise, which is from 87 to 90, and all of the romantic or sexual fic is about the Predator itself.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so that was an interesting find in AO3.
Unsurprising, I think, knowing how the internet works. And yeah. On to the next, 1988. We've left 1987, and we're talking about Midnight Run.
Another comedy.
And this is also, it's a buddy one, obviously. It's also one of the hardest comedies instead of action, but there is a little bit of action in there. When Eddie hires tight-lipped bounty hunter Jack Walsh, played by Robert De Niro, to locate a mob accountant named the Duke, played by Charles Grodin, and bring him to LA, Eddie tells Jack that the job will be simple, or a midnight run. But when Jack finds the Duke, the FBI and the mob are anxious to get their hands on him. In a cross-country chase, Jack must evade the authorities, hide from the mob, and prevent the Duke's erratic personality from driving him mad. This is textbook buddy comedy. This one is more, they're at odds. I think that there's less homoerotic sexual tension in this one.
You say that, but I'll tell you about a fic later that disproves it.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I think this is just on the list because it needs to be included.
I like him a lot. There's a subtlety to it. It's not super laugh out loud funny, but I think that Robert De Niro is funny. Like, it's not a surprise to me that he went on to do more comedic roles because there's just something naturally, like, his timing's so good and he's just delightful to watch. Before Robert De Niro became a caricature of Robert De Niro, this is prime Robert De Niro. It's exactly what you expect from him. He sounds like him. He acts like him. It's exactly what you want.
And he is taking the character very seriously, and he's playing the straight man pretty much.
That's why it works, I think. There's an emotional honesty to the movie where they get kind of vulnerable with each other in an interesting way, and that's where, to me, the interesting shippiness is to be found. I thought it was great. This is definitely one of my favorites of this bunch we're talking about.
It's good.
So AO3, not a ton going on. There are 5 fic, which is maybe more than I would have expected. And
that's more than I would have expected.
They're all slash, and I teased, but I will be talking more about one of them later. But for now, let's move on to 1989's. We're reaching the end of the decade. Tango and Cash.
Here we go. The logline is police officers Ray Tango, played by Sylvester Stallone, and Gabe Cash, played by Kurt Russell, are narcotics experts working to bring down a drug lord. In an attempt to stymie their efforts, the drug lord sets up Tango and Cash, making it look as if they've killed an FBI agent. Arrested and put in prison, the two cops formulate an escape plan and, once out, team up with Tango's exotic dancer sister, Catherine, played by Terry Hatcher, in order to clear their records and take down the drug lord once and for all. This movie, I think, is not great.
I would say it's actively bad. It's a bad movie. They didn't do a good job.
And it's not so bad it's good.
No.
It's just
It's almost there. It's almost so bad it's good.
close. I agree.
It's almost even more upsetting because it's almost so bad it's good. And if it had just been a little better but still not good, then it would have been more forgivable. But it's like, you look at Sylvester Stallone in the glasses.
The glasses are a bad choice. I mean, he can do glasses. We've all seen Rocky 1. They're great glasses. Stallone cannot play this character. He's like this rich investment guy who also is a cop and wears these ridiculous tailored suits and these glasses that are supposed to make him look like a smart guy who does investments, I guess, is what the glasses are for. It's a terrible character choice. And then Kurt Russell's supposed to be the fly by the seat of his pants guy, which is, believable.
I think they were trying to give them opposite characteristics so that they could clash in a way, but it doesn't quite line up.
No, absolutely not.
It's not like stockbroker is opposite of
wild card guy.
That's not even my biggest critique of the movie. My biggest critique is for the second third of this movie, it becomes a prison movie. And it's like, that's not what I want. Why was this the choice?
Well, and also it doesn't make any fucking sense how they end up in prison in the first place. Like, it's a bad movie.
Which is a great transition to the shipping of it all, or at least the homoeroticism. I'm going to read you, I'm not going to do a Sylvester Stallone accent as much as you guys want me to.
If only. Mm-hmm.
But I'll do a line reading now of their interaction where they are discussing what they will do now that they are in prison when the two of them are naked in the showers alone together.
The shower scene's wild.
At one point, they're discussing, whatever is going to happen. I can't believe we got set up. And then Kurt Russell bends over, and Sylvester Stallone, the joke being, or whatever, the motivation that he's playing is, what are you doing? What's happening? As in, are you going to start performing oral sex on me now? Cash? And then Kurt Russell calms him down and says, don't flatter yourself. And then he looks down at his genitals and says, Pee-wee. And then Sylvester Stallone responds, well, I don't know you that well. And then he goes, oh, by the way, don't worry, someday the other one will drop, referring to his testicles. Mm-hmm. In direct reaction to that, Kurt Russell says, well, attaboy, tripod, keep talking. And then he says, okay, Minnie Mouse, which is funny because he calls him Pee-wee and then he calls him tripod. So what are we really supposed to believe about the size?
It's confusing how big it is.
Intentionally vague, I think.
There's another trope here, which is the use of drag. And I guess now this is really why we did this podcast. Who is hotter, Jeff Bridges or Kurt Russell in drag?
Bridges.
Guys?
Bridges is
beautiful.
It's
Bridges.
Yeah.
I think he has a better wig, to be fair.
It's true. Kurt Russell doesn't have the right things going for him. But
yeah.
I agree. It was Jeff.
Yeah. All I can say is Patrick Swayze made the right choice doing Roadhouse and not this movie because he doesn't deserve to be in this garbage.
But don't worry, because he does drag with Wesley Snipes later.
Exactly.
Yeah, we do get him in drag, and Roadhouse rules.
Roadhouse rules. Anything else to say about this? AO3?
Let's talk AO3. Okay. There's 9 total.
Yep.
All slash.
I mean, it only makes sense. That is the end of the 80s, people. We made it through, but we would be remiss if we did not bookend our 70s movie with a 90s movie that I think is going to bring some of the themes we've discussed back together. So that film is 1995's Die Hard 3. Take it away, Todd.
So there was discussion of other ones that we could have done. So there's Bad Boys or Rush Hour or other ones. And any of those would have been a good example. But I think that they're the through line of people being at odds because of class or race or other issues. And also, I think it's just an interesting, we're talking about the, evolution of this genre and how Die Hard kind of had to reinvent itself by becoming Lethal Weapon in its third iteration. So I chose this one to be the bookend because I thought that it did a lot with race. And here is the logline for the third installation of Die Hard with a Vengeance, 1995. Detective John McClane, played by Bruce Willis, is now divorced, alcoholic, and jobless after getting fired for his reckless behavior and bad attitude. He is called back into action, however, when a cryptic terrorist, played by Jeremy Irons, takes New York City hostage in a lethal game of Simon Says and refuses to speak with anyone but McClane. Teaming up with a street-savvy electrician named Zeus, played by Samuel L. Jackson, McClane dashes through the city trying to stay one step ahead of a murderous plot. I am going to say a hot take, which is this is my favorite Die Hard.
Oh. That is a hot take.
I like the first one, fine. I hate the second one, and the other ones are not even noteworthy. This is probably my favorite Die Hard.
I'll say I hadn't seen it before, and I really liked it. Samuel L. Jackson, of course, is always additive. He's a great time. He's so cool. He's so funny. And I'll let Kelsey give her reaction, but when we wrap around to the race conversation, I think there's interesting stuff that happens in this one.
Yeah.
So I love the original Die Hard.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite action movies for sure, if not just one of my favorite movies. I did not like this one as much. I found the sort of the riddle structure of it to be kind of hokey, I guess.
Okay.
Hokey is maybe the word I'm looking for. It didn't work for me super well. But yeah, no, Samuel Jackson is great. I enjoyed his character. I enjoyed him with Bruce Willis.
To bookend the race conversation with how we started in 48 Hours and how we proceeded through the middle, I think it's interesting that there's this journey. Obviously, in 48 Hours, race is at the forefront of their relationship, right? It is the main point of conflict for them. It's there through the whole movie. It is ever present. And that is a huge part of the movie. As we go along, you sort of get to a point where we talked about, like, there are movies, Running Scared and Lethal Weapon, black-white partnerships completely unremarked upon. It becomes this background thing to how the movies are. Everyone expects there to be a black-white partnership because that's just how we do our action movies now, and they don't have to say anything about it. And then I think it's interesting that we get around to this place where race is a part of the relationship between Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis in this movie. It's like, that's how they meet. This guy is trying to fuck with Bruce Willis. He doesn't know who he is. He is planting bombs around the city, and he calls and insists that Bruce Willis show up in this neighborhood in Harlem in his boxers wearing a sandwich board that says "I hate N-words," just as an effort to get him killed by the people in this neighborhood in Harlem. And Samuel L. Jackson is an electrician who has a shop in the neighborhood, sees this guy show up here not knowing why he's there, and comes over to de-escalate the situation, and then ends up dragged along for this ride.
I think, to me, the ickiest part of this was what felt like we're living in a post-Rodney King world, or post-LA riots. Obviously, this movie takes place in New York, but as a culture and as a society, it is kind of a hot topic, right? In 95, we're coming right out of that. And so I think that there are some racially charged themes happening, right? And it really felt like a white man's idea of what an angry black man is. Of like, don't trust whitey type of, like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just, it's like, it's because I'm black, isn't it? It's like, it's such a white person writing a black person thing.
That joke in particular is very much a white person writing a black
And
character.
it's just like, they were really shoehorning it in. And it just, to me, that was the ickiest part. And I do agree, Kelsey, about it's not a perfect movie. And maybe I just am like jaded because I'm such a Lethal Weapon head. And everyone loves Die Hard so goddamn much that I'm like, I don't love it as much as everyone. So I think maybe that was why I think that I say that this is my favorite.
I mean, it can be your favorite.
Yeah.
And that's another line of like, what's the better movie and what's your favorite movie? I think that probably Die Hard 1 is the best movie. And then this is my favorite. But anyway, to me, what's funny is because it was so clumsily done, and also because it was in 95 and not 74 or 82. This, to me, felt the ickiest in terms of race.
This movie feels ickier to you than 48 Hours?
Because they were taking a stance on it, and it was very clear what they were trying to do. But it was like they were trying to come up with some ideology of Samuel L. Jackson's character here, and it just wasn't clear because they weren't really thinking about it. They were just trying to write a stereotypical angry black man that was concerned about race and didn't trust white people. And the other one was a clear racist cop, but it was very clear what they were doing, and I just disagree with that decision. Whereas this one, I don't even understand what their decision was.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, right, the issue with 48 Hours is Eddie Murphy's turn at the end to be friends with Nick Nolte, and that would not happen.
Right.
Well, also, we didn't discuss the ship. We can do that very quickly, which is that there's one little reference where it's just like, oh, yeah, give him flowers. And the cop's like, yeah, we all know you like pansies. That's the one, like,
I don't even remember
Groner,
I don't remember
a gay joke. But, like, there's not really much physical stuff, or once Jeremy Irons is introduced to the audience, we kind of stay on him a lot. It really shifts to where the second half of the movie, half of it is Jeremy Irons and half of it is these guys. And then every once in a while, we're getting a lot of these. I don't even know any of those actors' names. I kind of recognize some of them, but it was like, why aren't we spending more time?
How is henchmen a lot?
Yeah, a lot of henchmen. But I would say that this is maybe one of the weakest ships between these two. but it is important in the idea of
the evolution of the
Right.
buddy cop movie.
Yeah, I think the pacing of the movie doesn't allow for a lot of moments of quiet connection between the two characters, and that's kind of what
agree.
we're
Well, because
missing.
they're scrambling the whole damn time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's like,
they're
it
literally
really is
running
like, they're
around
going
the
to the
city.
next thing.
I mean, there's a clock ticking on a bomb for the length of the film, so.
Yeah.
Fanfic.
Yeah, 602 across the franchise.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
2 are John/Zeus. The vast majority, 532 slash fics between Matt Farrell and John McClane. And it turns out Matt Farrell, I don't know, is Justin Long's character from Die Hard 4, 2007.
come on, internet, get your shit together. Yeah, no, that's a weird one because he's like John McClane is definitely like a father figure for him. So anyway, internet's gonna write what internet's gonna write. I guess that brings us to just like a general summation of what's going on with the fanfic. Plus, you and I both read a little bit. So
Yeah.
people I'm sure have noticed there's not a ton for any of these things. There are a lot of potential reasons, things that we've discussed at length in other episodes. I think some theories that might potentially explain it are the recency bias issue. All of these are decades old. Well, we talked a lot about race in this one. So as we know, the presence of a non-white character drastically reduces the chances of there being a lot of transformational work about it. A lot of these are comedies. So we did a whole comedies episode about how people aren't writing fic about comedies. Also, they're all movies. And I find generally there's just smaller fanfic.
Right, there's less content to work off of. So some patterns that we've seen before, in cases like the one we just talked about with Die Hard 3, right? Like they like found a white guy to ship John McClane with, and it is a more recent film. Well, there we go. What fic did you read, Maddie?
I read a pretty delightful fic from the Midnight Run thriving fandom. As we said, there were 5 total fics. They're all slash. Most of them, as you find in these little tiny itty bitty fandoms where there's a couple of fic, they're like a few hundred words, not a lot's happening. But there was one like 10,000 word plus fic, like a real fanfic for Midnight Run, which was there was only one bed trope, which is always a good time. It's basically like, they're always sharing hotel rooms because they're working their way across the country. So the premise is their names are Jack and John, and I cannot for the life of me remember which one is which. So we'll go with De Niro and Grodin. Grodin, as he does through the length of the film, is asking De Niro a lot of personal questions, trying to get to know him. De Niro's putting him off. They get tired. Grodin is chained up to the radiator, doesn't want to spend the whole night like that. So De Niro is like, all right. And he handcuffs them to each other. They're going to sleep in the bed together because there's only one bed, obviously.
Oh.
De Niro's already been experiencing some confusing emotional feelings about the connection that he feels with Grodin. And then in the bed, the lights are off. They're still talking to each other. Grodin makes a move on De Niro. De Niro is into it. But then he finds out that Grodin is trying to sneak the handcuff keys. Classic Grodin move. And so he's all pissed. The two of them physically fight while they're still handcuffed to each other. And then they kiss.
On the bed?
No, they get out of the bed. And then they fight. And then they kiss. And then the run through of it is De Niro's getting annoyed that Grodin keeps saying that he's going to die, which is kind of a runner in the movie. Grodin is like, I'm obviously going to die if you deliver me. And De Niro's like, why do you keep saying you're going to die? You're going to be fine. And so he's trying to convince him that he is going to protect him from the mob boss. And then by the end, Grodin does admit to him that he kind of believes that he will protect him, but he says it after De Niro has already fallen asleep. So that's the end beat of it. But it was cute.
So they kiss, and then what? Nothing else transpires.
Well, there was like the beginnings of a hand job in the bed, but then it didn't go well.
There you go.
Grodin was sneaking the key, but the emotional catharsis of it is Grodin believes that he cares about him.
I can't believe you were going to tell us about the hand job. I believe they call that burying the lead. It's
That's
noteworthy.
The lead for you?
No, it's not the lead, but it's noteworthy.
Yeah, okay. Well, there you go, Todd. That's what happened in the fic. What did you read, Kelsey?
So I read all of the Thunderbolt and Lightfoot fic that was in
all
English.
Of them?
All of them.
So
as I mentioned, there were
pause. I didn't say what the fic was. I mean, we'll post it later, but my fic was called My Word is My Bond, but so are these handcuffs by Sir Robin 126.
Thank you, Maddie. So yeah, one of them is in Japanese. The other two are really short. So one is called Probably Safer Together. Both of these are by a writer called Fake Bodies.
Love that name.
And the other one is called Fabulous Face. And interestingly enough, both of them are from the perspective of Thunderbolt. And at least in one of them, he explicitly but Lightfoot is straight. So it can't ever be.
Thunderbolt thinks Lightfoot is straight?
Yeah. So one of them is a real micro one about him telling Lightfoot that he has a fabulous face and being like, oh, should I have said it? And he's like, no, it's all good that I said it. And then Probably Safer Together, they end up sharing a bed as well because Red has attacked Lightfoot. And he's like, I feel safer in the bed with you. But I think that's one where he's like, Lightfoot will never be mine.
Even though Lightfoot has been hitting on me for the length of the film.
Like if you were going to cast any of them, as any of them as gay and unrequited, for it to be Thunderbolt.
Well, I guess he does seem like the repressed one, right? Like
that's true.
Yeah.
Right. Kelsey, I have to ask you a question. And I didn't think that I was going to have to ask this question, but Madeline made me believe that I do. Were there any hand jobs that you're not mentioning?
No, there were no hand jobs.
Too short.
Okay.
Too short for hand jobs.
No kisses even.
That's two hand jobs down from me.
Does he does he confess his feelings? Does anything come of his unrequited? Well, that's a shame that he doesn't ever get to confess.
Yeah. I mean, they're very short.
So yeah, that's buddy action 80s movies. That's a lot of them. We've said a lot about a lot of movies, but is there more to say? Is there a theme?
Well, I guess, and I kind of teed it up, sometimes it regresses and it progresses in terms of the physicality of the men, the masculinity of the men, the expressed homophobia, the misogyny. For better or worse, it kind of ebbs and flows. And then I think that every movie is in reaction to itself, right? Very clearly, Die Hard 3 would not exist if Lethal Weapon wasn't such a successful franchise. And then, obviously not all of these were the cartoonish Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger body types, but you can see that in a lot of it. And I think it's very interesting. And the ideas of masculinity are always changing. And I think that we're in an interesting time right now because gender politics is very top of mind. And that's why I think it's great that you guys are doing podcasts like this. We're having open discussions like this, and we're analyzing things retrospectively in these 80s movies and then moving forward. And we're not canceling any movie for not living up to our current standards. We're criticizing them, but we can enjoy them for their merit without condemning them because of their faults.
Well said, Todd.
That was my closing argument. Did I win? Is this a game?
You won.
Yeah, you won.
It's I'll do all the points and they don't matter. This is
yeah,
exactly.
Who signs it anyway?
You got 1,000,000 points for that, Todd. I hope that pleases you. Yeah, so I'll say I love a buddy cop movie. I was pleased to do this. It was a good time, some more than others. I think that the through line of the racial aspects of the movies was an interesting part of the journey, and obviously that didn't end in 1995. The evolution of the black-white partnership, right, like that is still very much going strong today. But yeah, I thought this was a fun time, even though I had to watch Tango and Cash.
Yeah, I mean, my final thoughts, I think, are a little bit in a different direction, thinking about these movies through the lens of our podcast. And right, we went through the quick listing of why we think there's not as much transformative fic around these things. And I think they're probably all true. But we've covered some older fandoms as well. And so, I think the lingering question in my mind is, we know transformative fandom is primarily created by not men.
Yep.
And so what is the hook for not men that's missing in these movies to engage them in the way that we've seen them engage with Starsky and Hutch? And, we talked a lot about the comedy episode and the potential impact of comedic distance, the potential impact of the actors not being quite as attractive. But I can't help but think about, again, the early part of our conversation of I don't know if women watch these overly muscle-bound bodies and go, this is something that I'm connecting to in any way and can relate to. I think it is such a male fantasy that's missing. And so, I don't know how that ends up functioning in a film like Lethal Weapon, which in my mind is, if there was one that you would take out of all of these and say there could be a lot of shipping activity around them just based on their relationship, based on the way the actors look, that stands out to me as the one that would maybe have the most fic. Although I guess Midnight Run has some elements of that as well, although it is also a comedy.
Yeah, because I also think just creatively, artistically, it's one of the best movies. So there's depth to character. Whereas, For example, again, Commando is cotton candy. We're not really shipping that because it's like, gives up connection with anything except for his fucking gun. You know what I mean? So there's that. But then also, you know, some of these you guys had seen, some of you hadn't. Like, obviously, I think probably just the lives that you have led and the movies and TV that you consume, this didn't leap out to you as like, well, that's something that I would have watched as a child or I would go out of my way to watch now. But besides Tango and Cash and some other ones, but you guys like these movies as women and as fans of movies.
Oh, yeah. I'm by no means saying that women don't like these movies as a person who loves an action movie, right? Like, that's not the argument. It's just what drives transformative fandom, which is a little bit different than what I just personally enjoy as a film.
And I mean, I really like, you're right that a lot of the Predators of the world and the Commandos of the world, maybe women don't watch that and think these are my ideal men. But I really strongly think a necessary element for a strong transformational fandom is that it be a TV show. Like that it be a long running series of content that you have a lot of material, a lot of time to attach to the characters and that sort of thing. I think it's just really hard because a movie comes and goes and you watch it and you're like, oh, I have thoughts about that movie.
Right.
And then you
outside of the movies that came out at the height of Tumblr when people were just like, we have to ship all the things.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, also, and then, you know, there are some, there's 4 Lethal Weapons, there's at least 4 Die Hards, right? But your point still stands. Just the way that we are interacting with characters in TV shows is character driven and not as plot driven as a movie is. So you get to know more about them, you get to know about them in scenarios, as opposed to like, it's really hard to ship Samuel Jackson and Bruce Willis because they're running around and they're going here, they're going to do this and going to do that. Whereas if there was a Bruce Willis and Samuel Jackson sitcom, I would watch every episode. And also, it'd be much easier to ship them because we would see their dynamics in different scenarios.
Absolutely.
All right. Wow. Great thoughts, everyone. Well done. I think we all won, even though
Wait a minute. This is bullshit.
I assign 1,000,000 points to Kelsey, and I will take 1,000,000 points for myself. To sum up our end points, we normally would talk about our queer baiting scale here. I think you and I both agree this sort of predates queer baiting in any like traditional modern sense.
I think coming out of our Starsky and Hutch and Star Trek, if you have any questions about why we're saying that, listen to those episodes.
Exactly. Again, here's where I would normally ask the question, does Kelsey want to read fan fiction now? But I won that point in our last episode. So if you, again, haven't listened to Starsky and Hutch, go listen to it. But things have changed for our pal Kelsey.
Yeah, that part of our podcast is kind of over.
that will end now. I'm no longer talking about it. So yeah, that is 80s action buddy cop movies, whatever we're calling it. What are we talking about 2 weeks from now?
We are finally doing it, Maddie.
Oh.
When we thought about this podcast, we initially were going to have a running joke that we forgot about like, oh, are we going to do it? Are we going to do it next week? Now it's too late. We're tackling Supernatural.
Oh boy,
next time.
I mean, if people are in this fandom world, if you have ever been on Tumblr, you will know that this is the big guns of queer baiting. There's much to be said about it. It's going to be a multi-part episode because we just have so much to say, but we will be getting into that next time on the pod. In the meantime, if you have questions, comments, concerns, please send us an email at ltbkpod@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter and Tumblr at ltbkpod. If you're enjoying the podcast, tell a friend. New episodes come out every other Friday at 6 o'clock Eastern, wherever you get your podcasts.